Well, thank you so much for being here, Brenton. As you're talking about, we met on TikTok. Um, I feel like I'd seen your videos for a while, honestly. I love your content, but we had like connected in the comment section over like I feel like a Beyonce, Taylor Swift kind of
Yeah.
video. We're both, someone has a really good like fan name for like Beyonce Swifties, like Teyances maybe. Like I feel like we're both in that camp.
Yeah, yeah, right in the middle.
Exactly. So really glad that we could have this conversation. And I would love to just start with you introducing yourself to everyone, talking about like your journey, who you are, and what your journey has been like in creating your practice, the mental hug.
Sure. So my name is Brenton Guice. I was a dental hygienist for about 11 years. And really, about halfway through my career, I noticed that I just truly was struggling to find some contentment or fulfillment with work. And I job hopped. I left as a dental hygienist for a little while. I did some photography and I was really chasing things that I just didn't really know what I was looking for. And here I am now as a therapist. I did a big switch and pursued grad school that really kind of defined the nature of where I am now. But there's a lot more to the story about like how I decided to become a therapist, and then of course how the mental hug was essentially born, really, in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. And tell us about that. And like, you decided to become a therapist and like go on your journey. And where does the mental hug come from? First of all, it's an amazing name. I love that so much. And how
Yeah.
does that sort of get going?
Yeah, so when I was a hygienist, and more so questioning kind of where I wanted my life to go. I had a patient that had came into the office and I had worked with her for quite some time. So we had a great relationship and I could sense that something was just not right. And what I mean by that is just her energy was down and I knew that normally her affect or her mood was a bit more lifted. And after we kind of did our initial greets and hellos and things, I had her sit down and then I normally would just kind of run into my hygiene mind of like, I need to do this, because it's a very time regimented career. And I took that hat off for a moment and I sat down in my chair. I kind of slid across to kind of be eye to eye level. And I looked at her and I said, Hey, I just want to check in. Is everything okay? And at first she's like, yeah, everything's fine. And I kind of asked one more time. I said, hey, I won't ask again, but I'm just really, I'm really worried about you. I just hope that you're okay. And then immediately, she started crying. And, at first, it's always been natural for me to just be like a comfort person. And so it didn't make me feel weird or anything. I just kind of sat there for a moment and she shared and offloaded quite a lot of life changes that had happened within about 6 months.
Wow.
And it was in that moment that I said, okay, I have two options. I can either um, kind of tidy it up and move on with with the day, or I could actually just be a human and just listen and just provide an ear. And so I did, and I think it was probably about maybe 15 to 20 minutes. I kind of just sat there and she was
Mhm.
just sharing and it wasn't like she was just constantly talking, right? There was some shares and then some more tears and then some quiet and all the things. And I did happen to look at the clock and I realized at that point I was not going to be able to do everything that we had originally scheduled for. And I knew that that wasn't going to make or break anything. And so I did intervene at one point and I said, Hey, I'm going to have to interrupt you for just a moment. I do want to clarify that we're not going to have time to do everything. and that's totally fine. I am going to go ahead and get the dentist so he can come in and check everything out. Um, just touch base, make sure everything's okay, and then we can set something up next time to get you caught back up. And so we did. We followed through with everything, got what we could get done. And then near the end of our time, we started wrapping things up, and I got her scheduled for kind of the next appointment. And as we were about to leave, um, she started gathering her things, and I kind of tidied up my little spot, and she grabbed my forearm, and she made like very direct eye contact and just muttered the words, "Thank you." And of course, at that moment, I was like, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
like for what? Like what did I do? All I did was listen. I felt like I rushed her. Like there was just so many thoughts that flooded in my mind. I was just like, what do you mean? And I didn't, I said, "You're welcome. I'm not sure what I provided. I don't know what I did." And she said, You listened to me." She said, "There have been so many people that lately just either wanted to intervene, have advice, tell me what I should or should not do." And she said, I really just needed someone to listen to me, and I didn't expect to get that today." She said, I really appreciate that. Um, Now, mind you, this was kind of, I think, late morning, I believe. I think it was early in the day, and the day just goes on, right? Like I was like, we tidied up, I gave her a hug, and we moved on. I went back into the room and then next patient, right? So I didn't really have a lot of time to think about it until I got home. I got home and it hit me. Like it really hit me. I sat there for a moment and I was like, wow. Like I had a moment with someone today. And for like weeks prior to that, I had already started kind of questioning like job outlook, or like what do I want to do in 5 years? Like what's my 5-year goal? I
Yeah.
think I was around 25 at this time. And it's like the stars just kind of aligned in that moment. It was like, huh, like here's something that felt really good and it felt natural. And I think it was maybe that night or the next day I started researching how to become a therapist. I mean, it was really just like night day. Um, I looked at different grad school programs. I looked at, I started questioning, oh my gosh, because my undergrad degree was in dental hygiene. So I started even questioning, do I have to start all over? Like, do I
Yeah.
need to go from like,
Lots of schooling.
yeah, which I love school, but I was like, oh, like I don't know if like
Hmm.
I have
Hmm.
the time or the
Yeah.
resources, right? And so I I kind of put it off to the side. It was like a side bubble in my world. I bookmarked it. I didn't pursue it any further. And maybe about a week to 2 weeks later, I had another patient come in that we never really talked about career together. Um, they we just vibed off like other life stuff. So like job just never came up. But for some reason that week it did. And they're in my chair, and next thing you know, they said, "Hey, gosh, work this week has just been really busy." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "I don't even know if we've ever talked about that." And then their response was, "Oh, I'm a therapist."
Oh my God.
And so like in that moment, I had this like epiphany. I was like, okay, so I have yet to tell anybody about this brainstorm that I have. It was a very secretive thing that I kind of just kept to myself because I was like, I don't want to get other people's hopes and energies up and then make me get excited if it just doesn't fall through. And
Yeah.
it's a lot of my own personal stuff, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna keep this inward, but that opened up a link because I was able to say quietly interview this person about like how did you get to where you are? Like what were the
Yeah.
steps you took? You know, what was your schooling like? And it was so fruitful because that really pushed me to then setting up an interview with an advisor at my grad program that I was able to then just from there, it really just took off. I remember sitting in that session with the advisor thinking, am I stupid for thinking I could just switch careers like this in my life? I've never had anything remotely close to being a therapist.
Yeah.
A hygienist, some might say we are because we do experience a lot of life experiences. You know, like we talk to people, we have to be very patient forward and compassionate and all these things. So part of my career did involve that, but it was my job was not to provide therapy, right? So like I didn't know like is this a wrong choice? And his response was, you know, you're going to be fine. You know, there are many people who have undergraduate degrees in so many different things, and you can get a master's degree
Yeah.
in different. He says your careers are, you know, different, but similar. So there's not going to be a big, you know, you're not jumping from a whole entire different type of career to something else. You're still,
Right.
you know, people forward in your day.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then I just pursued that and went to school and took a huge leap on becoming a private practice owner. And so to answer your question about the mental hug, you know, this is where like about halfway through grad school, I was already thinking ahead. Like I want to be my own boss. I want to I want to be a voice in who I work with. Like I really wanted to have some ability to kind of work with the population base that was really passionate for me. And so I was like, I know that I want to have a little bit more autonomy in the process. But before I could figure out how I was going to do the whole solopreneurship thing, my brain was not going to let me do anything else in regard to planning until I figured out what my business was going to be called. So there goes part of my ADHD. I was so hyper fixated
Yeah.
figuring out the name.
Yeah. I
It
feel
was,
that.
yes, it was not letting me I could not brainstorm like, you know, where do I want my office to be? What I want my office to look like. Nope. Like I was like, I need to figure out this name.
So
And
yeah.
I always knew I could fall back on my own name. Like I knew like Brenton Guice therapy or, you know, something to that regard. But I wanted something unique. I wanted something different. And but more so that spoke to another thing that was really passionate in my life. Um, so I was sitting there. I remember I was alone. My husband was he was out of the house. I was by myself. I had the dogs next to us, and I was sitting there and running through these thoughts. And then I finally just hit a wall, and I was like, "Gosh, I I don't think I'm gonna figure this out." And my great grandma, who passed away, it was 2015. I had a moment because I was really, really close with her. She was a safe space growing up, and she was my person. And there was just a moment that I had sitting on the couch. I was just thinking of her. She came into my mind, and I was like, Grandma, I really miss you. You know, I would just love to hear you laugh again or just to joke around with you again. And I kept talking, and I was like, almost like just feeling your hug would be great. Like if I could just feel your presence. And it's like, I know I can't physically feel you, but even just a mental hug would be great. And then I sat there for a moment and I had immediate goosebumps. And I was like, I think that's it.
Yeah.
You know, mental hug, the mental hug, right? Because hugs don't have to be physical. We can we can hug people with our energy, with our, our vibe, just a smile. You can feel like a presence of a hug in that way too, because it's about like how you feel around somebody. And I felt just her energetic hug, and I was like, thanks, Grandma. You completely just helped me. So I wrote it down, like I was like quick, like I had
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, this is it. And the first thing I thought of was search for it. Because I didn't want to get too excited if someone else had already had it, which would be fine. I would figure something out. And it wasn't. There was nothing on Google aside from I think a couple like someone had mentioned, sending mental hugs to somebody like years ago, right? But there was no businesses attached to it. So boom, I got the domain. I started applying for um, kind of the business part of everything, doing that whole administrative stuff. And then I filed for a trademark as well, just to have security and just knowing that it's my little baby. And it's budding. I really have high dreams with kind of where I want this to go. And so it's still very early stage, but um, that's how I got it. So the mental hug, and my dream and my passion is anyone who walks in my space in terms of career. I do this outside in just regular life as well. But if I'm working with folks, I really want them to feel that they're receiving a mental hug just anytime that we're around one another, that they can feel the presence, the energy. And so I try to kind of take and channel my grandmother's unconditional love and regard and kind of just shove it out just so that she can kind of work through me as well in that space.
Well, you're clearly doing that. Like, I already can tell from just this like short time already with you. What a amazing story. Like it's so funny like listening to it and wondering like I'm like listening very presently, wondering like where the name is gonna come in. And I don't know why, but I was like, and now the patient's gonna tell him that was a mental hug. And I was like, okay, that's not it. And like, where is it gonna come from? And like the fact that your grandmother like came to you in that moment,
Yeah.
like she named a business for you,
Mhm.
kind of. And the way that you're able to that's just really they gave me goosebumps. That's really beautiful.
Thank you. She was at the time I didn't realize it. When we're adults, it's fascinating how we can kind of look back, of course, right, and kind of see things in a different perspective. And that can come with pain points, of course, that can come with some really difficult, kind of insightful moments. But in this regard, I realized through all the difficult moments and the rough times and the trauma that I experienced, she was always kind of that security blanket.
Yeah.
I could just be myself around her. She was such ahead of her time. No
Mhm.
matter, you know, whom you were, she was always like a willing person, like, come in, let's have lunch. Or, she would want to feed you, just see you feel comforted and loved. And I feel so incredibly grateful and honored to have experienced that because I know, not a lot of people are afforded that. And there was such an energy to be around her that you just didn't have to explain yourself.
Yeah.
I never had a chance to come out to her, and I realized that I never really had to.
Mhm.
As I would loved to have had that opportunity just to kind of feel like I can offload something like, hey, I can be my authentic self or my person around you. But she was someone that I just feel like I didn't have to explain that. Like I could kind of take that identity and just leave it in me, leave it on me. I didn't have to like put it on a table and say, here, like this is who I am, love it or hate it. Like
Yeah, because you knew how much she loved you, and you knew she would accept that part of you.
Yep.
It reminds me on your website, you have all those great subsections. I love your website so much. My friends and I, like, we love websites. I think like website porn for us. We're like, look at this, look at that. And like, I had to turn me like so good. I love Brenton's websites. But you have
Thank
these
you.
great subsections and talk about coming out slash letting in, I think it is. And
Yeah.
which made me think of that immediately. And like the nuance of that process.
Yeah.
I'm bisexual myself, and like I came out, it's fun to say, like 3 years ago, but it almost felt like, I don't know, like weird. Even though people come out all stages of their life, I was like, well, this is like a new little thing, and like I don't really feel like I need to make an announcement and all this. So I felt like that letting in like made so much more sense when I read that on your website. Like, yeah, that was what it was for me at that time. And that story with your grandma too, that makes so much sense. I have to say, as a really quick, I also, it's so funny. Before we came on, I was sitting here on the Zoom getting ready, and I have this it's like Taylor Swift friendship bracelet that I made with my friend
Mhm.
um in a season of grief this year. A lot of people unfortunately passed away. And it made me think of my aunt, who was a grandmother figure in my life, who didn't die recently, but just kind of, better than I do as therapists, grief can bring up different kinds of grief. And thinking about her a lot. Her name was Eileen, and she was very much my grandmother figure in my life. Um, and so I made this bracelet that's "Come on, Eileen," like to kind of have her with me a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I sometimes like wear it. I used to wear it a lot more, and I still do, but often I'll think like, oh, like I should wear it. Like you should come along today. Like, do you want to come? And I wasn't planning on wearing it. But I had it on the table. I was like, oh, do you want to like come for the interview? And she was like, yeah, I want to come for the interview. Like, that'll be fun. And so it's really, I think, very spiritual and like so cool that I have feeling the energy before you even came on. And it feels like she was very much that presence in my life too. Like the person I could come to. And like, I remember I got in so much trouble when I was like 8, like for like trying to like, I don't even know, just like be up late with my cousin or country house. And everyone was so mad at us. And the next day she was just like, it's a new day. It's
Yeah.
chill, fine. And my parents were still so mad. And I was like, oh, Eileen said it's a new day. So like, can't mad at me anymore. It's over. And I just wanted to share that because it felt so present.
I love that. I think there's something to be said about having those little glimmer reminders, right? Just the little things. I have a quartz crystal that's kind of carved in a shape of an owl, and that's also symbolic of my grandma. So not
But
only like is the name of the business kind of a constant reminder, but I have her placed in a position to where when I'm working with folks, she's kind of in the corner of my eye. So like if I ever just want a moment to kind of, if I'm getting in my feels or if I'm starting to get distracted, because it still happens, right? I have ADHD and it's easy to kind of start thinking about something else, but I kind of look over there and I'm like, okay, focus, right? Like this person's really important to you right now, and it helps. I mean, it really, really helps. And she keeps me grounded. She keeps me very rooted in why I wanted to do this in the first place.
yeah.
Uh, so much of grief, like for me, uh, we all get touched by grief at some point in our life. We can't escape it, right? So to love is to grieve, and it's a really difficult challenge for each person, and it's a different journey for each person, and how we celebrate or move forward is also different. There's not a rule book that is handed to us on like what is the best way to work through grief. And I think with grandma, what really helped with that is I never had to say goodbye to her either. So
Hmm.
like, you know, at the end, she did very well through her life and sense of health, and things just started rapidly declining, kind of right toward the end of her life, and I never got to say goodbye to her when she was in a conscious state. So that was really difficult to kind of process. But then I realized, like, well, there's also a way to kind of move forward and to live on with her. Physically, of course, she's not here, but I can feel her love. I can still feel her energy and the memories, the all the nostalgia that kind of comes up. I always feel like those are just ways to kind of remind me of the love that she provided. And so I often, now know just because of the mental hug that um that was almost like her way of reminding me like, hey, like I'm still here, I'm still supporting you, I'm watching you, and I'm going to push you forward and into life and just see what happens. And so like never having to say goodbye. So that bracelet, in many ways for you, is her just coming along with you, right? And just being there.
Exactly. That's so beautiful. I saw this really beautiful musical with Idina Menzel coming to Broadway next year, which is super exciting. I saw
Oh,
it at La Jolla Playhouse. Very much in like the heart, the thick of my season of grief this year. The beginning of, I should say, and it deals with child loss, the musical,
mhm.
and stuck with the redwoods in California and how the heartwood of a redwood center that keeps it growing is like apparently like actually dead on the side of the trunk.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful line Dean says, maybe the dead are the heart of the living. And like this
Mm.
person, my heart would. And that just like I was the messiest, snottiest, like hot tears rolling down my face version of myself. But it was so it's so healing to talk about grief in this way. And like I love going back to your website, the different sections, even on grief that you have. Like a lot of therapists will say, oh, I support people in grief, and that's it. And that's great. But you have those sections of like traumatic loss, ambiguous loss, caregiver loss, like all different kinds that I think speak so beautifully to the nuance and the branches of like the different kinds of grief people go through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so variable. I think oftentimes when we think of grief, right, our minds go to just the physical loss. Like it's kind of almost ingrained. It's like, oh, someone's grieving, who did you lose, right? And
Yeah.
it's did someone pass away or did your pet pass away, which of course those are still very valid reasons, but there are also other forms of it, which would be, the loss of a friendship that or the loss of a partner, a very physical bodied person that's still alive that you don't have a connection with anymore. Um, in particular to the LGBTQIA plus community, grief is interlaced heavily through the experience, whether it be loss of identity as you start to kind of align with authenticity, right? There's that feeling of I'm finding myself, but I'm also losing so much because I could be losing
Mm-hmm.
family, I could be losing a sense
Yeah.
of safety and
Yeah.
security. So there, and to have to grieve that can feel so weird because it's kind of like, how am I grieving something that is like just my life experience, right? And just figuring that out. So yeah, it's definitely multifaceted for sure.
Yeah, just so many layers. I mean, in the LGBTQ experience, specifically in the trans experience, like so many layers, just in so many different ways. And I think we've gotten at it in so many different ways. I think just the importance of having authentic connection as you go
Yeah.
through times, like with a therapist, with a friend you can like not perform your grief to.
Mhm.
Specifically, I learned a lot when you're grieving. I
Oh,
feel like you're kind of like going through it, but also like you're kind of learning about society and you're like, this is so interesting. Like the way people are treating me right now, like anthropologically.
yeah.
Like some people want to say they're sorry, and some people don't say they're sorry, which is very weird. And I was like, oh. And then there's sometimes you want to quantify the grief. And like after my uncle passed away while I was doing my first coaching workshop, which was a super strange experience, like in the middle of the workbook of the text. And
Yeah.
I'm at this conference. I don't want to tell anybody about it. It feels weird. But I did tell one person, and they're like, oh, are you close? And I felt kind of reaction of, I
Hmm.
understand the question, but now I feel like because he has had hearing loss for the last couple of years and I haven't talked to him in a while, like now I feel like you're gonna think I'm grieving differently
Yeah.
because we can talk every day. And so I think there's so many ways to like honor authentic grieving
Mhm.
without understanding every single part of a person is going through. And I
Yeah.
think that speaks to authentic connection as well. I mean, going all the way back to the beginning of conversation with that woman in the chair at the dentist office. Like, I think there's a misconception sometimes that you have to understand everything about what someone's going through to honor where they are authentically.
Right.
And that I feel like we both agree is not the case.
Yep. So
Yeah.
very true. Like my motto is, of course, meet people where they're at, right? Because we can get so into self-serving like needs. If it's like, oh, I need to figure out what's bothering them, or oh, I need to make it better. And it's like, well, for who? Because maybe they don't want to feel better right now. Maybe they're still trying to sit with it or to really just process it. Because the rushy also makes it seem like it's not okay to feel sad, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like the
like
idea of let me get you feeling better. And it's
yes.
like, I don't have the flu. Like I'm gonna I'm gonna be sad, you know? Yeah.
Because when we meet people where they're at, then we also provide them the opportunity to let us know what's going on, right? So to not speak for them, to not kind of take it away from them, really puts it in their hands. And yes, there are folks that may not know how to word things or articulate things, and that's a whole different, kind of process to help them get to a space to where they can kind of articulate what's going on. But generally speaking, like to be in a spot where, you kind of just meet them where they're at. And sometimes a listening ear is so much more valuable than an interjection of unsolicited advice.
Always
Yeah.
my favorite question to ask friends when like I also I'm a good listener, but every now and then I'm like, but I have a solution for your life. And then I ask myself, I ask them, like, do you want solutions or do you want support? And
Right.
usually it's support. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't want that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think, yeah, just the listening ear, the way that it all comes together, it's so beautiful. And so you clearly do so much in helping your patients, your dental hygienist patients, like with their with their authentic selves and making literally more room for that, like more room in a dental appointment, room in a therapy appointment in life. And it's so great to see how that has like rippled into your authenticity. I mean, that like 20 minutes with that patient, like change the course of your life and then to ripple out into this. And so here in this moment, like in this chapter of your business, like looking back on your journey, what would you say that authenticity means to you, like now, today?
Absolutely. It's one of those questions that like to hear, it's kind of like, ooh, like
I
how do we
know,
answer that, right?
I know, right? It's fun because I've asked this question like 10 times to people. The answer, I never have to answer it.
Probably a different answer every time,
Yes.
because I think like, so because of that, let's just start with this. Like, it's definitely a subjective experience, right? Because like what authenticity means to me would most certainly perhaps be a different experience for someone else. Um, I would personally, though, add in that I think authenticity in a nutshell, really is kind of like a feeling, a vibe, an alignment kind of values and kind of personal beliefs or goals, but also an ability to kind of surrender to your identity without fear of where that's going to go.
Yeah.
Now, what's tough is that, you know, authenticity, I feel like in some ways, many of us can still feel like caged birds, right? Because there are certain parts of our identity or our life experience that regardless, if we are aligned with our authenticity, we're still met with um, blockages, right? Or experiences in life that perhaps don't allow us to move forward in a way that feels very lifted. Um, so it's to be authentic, I think, is also in many ways a way to just feel like you can be yourself around the folks that matter and in spaces that are important for you.
I love that. And I also think like that, like the folks that matter is very important. Because I think people talk about authenticity a lot, and people will say to me, "Oh, I'm mostly up myself all the time with everybody." And I'm like, no, you don't have to be off. Like, I think you can say whatever you want to the woman in the grocery store line, as long as you're being like nice and kind. But I think that idea of like with the folks that matter feels very important. And it's
Yeah.
also interesting to think about authenticity like on the small scale and then how we sort of send ourselves to like all the folks in the world and authenticity in social media being
Yeah.
on as you are and Instagram and all the things. But what's it like showing up authentically online as a therapist on TikTok?
Well, I'm still trying.
You're doing a great job. I love it. I'm loving it.
There are some friends and like colleagues that I have yet to even meet that I've met just say on social platforms that are doing the thing as say very social media forward therapists. And I feel like I'm in this like small little space, like just barely breaking through. But you know that was like that's it's a lot of untangling and unlearning that I've had to do to be okay with just that, right? Because like so much of the pressure with social media is that you feel like you have to be like say go viral or you have to like be seen by any and everybody. And I took a step back not too long ago and was like, you know, I'm only making it harder for myself because I'm setting myself up with very high expectations. And to not meet those is really just causing more harm. Like I'm kind of making myself feel um like unproductive or like I'm not doing enough. I'm not having enough content all the time. And I've got other things to worry about, right? Like I've got my job, I'm trying to start my business. I've got my own like, you know, small chosen family bubble in my marriage and like all these things like to really also focus on. And those are priority to me, right? So like the social media part, I've just sprinkled things here and there, and I'm trying to be a little bit more, say, consistent, but also not pressure myself to have like 3 videos a day. Because
Yeah,
it's
it
just a
can get
lot of
addictive.
hard work.
It can get addictive, and it is a lot of hard work. People like very much think you just like make a little TikTok and put a sound on it. But, like it takes an embarrassing amount of time for me to put together a really good reel. So
Oh my gosh, I know. Like all the bloopers and oh.
literally, I'm like, surely, like this is not the same person that like got a college degree. Like this is very hard for me.
There was one video I made, I kid you not. I had so many bloopers in it, and every time I tried to talk, of course, I had the millennial pause and everything.
Mhm.
Like I was literally trying to, and I was laughing the whole time. So I was like, you know what? I'm just posting this one because I'm tired of like trying to, I can't even remember what I was trying to talk about. It was probably a little blurb that was mental health related that I really wanted to share, but I couldn't get 2 words out without laughing because I just felt it was just a very humorous day, I guess. And
Yeah.
I just posted that video. I was like, I keep cracking up, I keep laughing. Here's my TikTok. See you later.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that one got, you know, some buzz. Like it wasn't, you know, it didn't go viral, of course, but like there was some interaction with that. And I think in that moment it did highlight to me like that is my authentic self. Like not the person that shows up and is perhaps talking very plain, like just plain tone, right? Not having like a lot of energy or things associated
Yeah.
with it. Growing up, I was also very fearful of expressing my mannerisms. So in
Mm,
many ways, I talk a lot with my hands and I can be effeminate in some ways. And so I would always be very cautious of that. I would try to lower my voice. I would try to appear very straight, presenting, and all the things which made me feel like I was just shoving myself into a box. And so when I would get in front of people to talk, like in class or in any public situation, I now that I have to deal with because of all of that, I now have a lot of social anxiety. So I have to deconstruct from that, and I'm learning that social media has been kind of a gateway opportunity to like be a little bit, say, more forward with that part of myself and not be too shy about it. And that's
yeah.
been so helpful
Yeah.
because in public speaking situations, there's still that kind of inescapable feeling. Where social media, you can make a video and kind of turn it off, right? You can turn your phone off. You can't stop the comments. You can't stop all the things. Well, you can, of course, but like you can kind of shut it off and to a degree. Whereas when
Mhm.
you're kind of in a room full of people, the only escape route is just running away from the podium, like 2 words out. So like I have a goal of wanting to get to that space, right? To be a public speaker, to share and to provide some inspiration, but that's still a long ways away. I'm still trying to learn that.
I totally hear you. And I think like there's so much authenticity in just like showing up with that like social anxiety and insecurity of like this is something I want and I'm working towards. And here's a space that it's working in and here's where I'm going. And I think that like it's so healing for people to hear people in the mental health space and therapists like talk about these things because I think that sometimes there is this conception that you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
Like I became a coach, I very much was like, oh, people are gonna think that I like, do I need to show up differently now? Like I have it all figured out. And I was like, wait, well, I can't do that because I do not. And so I
Yeah.
definitely like admire the commitment to showing up authentically and speaking authentically about who you are and how you're still growing as you help others facilitate their growth. And
Yeah.
I wonder too, with showing up online, for me, like I love everyone being on TikTok. I love your page. I love Therapy Jeff. I love anyone on TikTok. Like, show me a surgeon on TikTok. Like, just put it all on there. But they are definitely, as you know, people who will argue professional distance and like not showing your personal life, especially like as a professional and like dealing with the privacy and the HIPAA. And so, like, I'm curious if you've experienced any insecurities around that or any backlash and how you sort of like made the choice to show up and just like, carve the space out. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. In many ways, so a lot of the content that I've made has not necessarily involved my work with clients. So I have kind of done it in a way that it's more personal stuff, really. Like a lot of the things that influence my uh, like shares or my posts is actually just my day-to-day life stuff.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, you know, while social media, there are so many content creators out there that provide such a wealth of knowledge, and kudos to them. Like I follow these folks too. I'm like save these videos, bookmark these videos, like it's helpful information. Gosh, you should see my collections area. It's
Oh my
ridiculous.
God, I know my saves. Like, if there
It's
was a currency for those, like I would be a millionaire tomorrow.
I know myself well enough. Like I'm not going back in there and like
No, I'm never going to. But like,
oh
if you ever ask me what that really funny video was from last Thursday, I will have it.
yeah, I'll have it. Like
Yeah.
I know where it's at. Organized chaos. Uh,
Yep.
and like for me, I was like, okay, so in situations like this, like in talks with you in this moment, these organic kind of connections, it's easier for me to share information in this domain. There's something about turning on my camera, like my brain just switches off. Like if I try to like share info, it comes off very robotic because I'm like, I know I'm talking to people via this phone, um, but I'm not interacting, right? Like for me, it's all about a human energy. So talking like this, for me, it's so much more easy and it's more organic and I can connect with myself better. So speaking of authenticity, I feel like I show up more authentic in this way versus if I just press record on my phone and I'm trying to like share something. So because of that, I've really, I would say, kind of harnessed my things that I create to just a certain pocket of stuff. So I share just funny things, or if there are sound bites, I might jump on that bandwagon a little bit. I may kind of just show my personality a little bit, and or the things that I do talk about, if I have little narratives, it's often because of something that I experienced and I'm trying to just share it, so if anyone else connects with it, great. Those that I meet, those that I see as my people in my career, I try to protect their journeys as much as possible. So I really honor the sanctity of our time together, that I don't really want to kind of pull from that as inspiration, because I really want to value, like they're coming to me and I really want to value our space. It's very sacred and I want to, really keep it that way.
Course, of course. No, I completely can relate on like the kind of switch when a camera turns on. I was an actor for years, and I think it's almost second instinct of like I'm a character now.
Yeah.
Versus here, we're just talking, and like yes, it's being recorded, but we're just having a conversation. A friend actually said to me last week, she was like, when you do the voiceover for your blogs, like when I just read them out loud, I do this voiceover just accessible. She was like, your voice is different. It's like an octave different. And I was like, is it? And I definitely go a little higher sometimes. But there are moments when it gets back in, and I feel like it's almost like an authenticity meter of like
Yeah.
how I'm feeling based on the octave of my voice. I could literally talk to you all day. This has been so much fun, and I'm so glad that we got to connect. I have like a million more questions we have time for, so I'm grateful that we get to be friends in real life. But I
Yeah.
really did want to get this quote in as we start upping up. Tell me about, you posted this quote, the story a little while ago. I'd rather be embarrassed than fake.
Mhm.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that has been kind of a personal like venture to, I mentioned the word surrender earlier, and like I've really been on a path of like surrendering to just my authentic self. So I mean that's the highlight of this whole conversation, right? So my authentic self is someone who is, we've talked about a lot of my values, like they've been sprinkled in throughout the thing, and I'll highlight just two of them for now. Um, Someone who is unapologetically clumsy, and
Like that.
also like I it's easy for me to just make a fool of myself, like whatever, like in any situation, like I might trip over something, or I sometimes I do have like the letter mix up in words, like just some of the, brain mix up of letters. Not dyslexia to that degree, but just close enough, like enough to be frustrating. But I've learned that through a lot of life experience, there have been many moments that I've experienced embarrassment, just as we all have. And so much so that it's caused me to lock myself in my bedroom and not want to be social, right? Like not want to go out and do all the things. So I learned that if I embrace a little bit of embarrassment or a lot of embarrassment, depending upon the situation. And it allows me to not be someone I'm not. Like I want to be, I want to be me. And by hiding or running away from maybe potential embarrassing moments, I can be my true self, or I can be my whole self. And I don't have to appease to everybody. That's an impossible life mission. And I've learned that. And so it's one of those like, if I'm embarrassed, hey, I'm embarrassed. And those that really value and treasure me or even accept those embarrassing qualities, I know that they're going to still be there. And if I can then show up truthfully and wholeheartedly authentic in that way, then that's what I want, right? I want that versus being or feeling fake. So that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah, I love that. It made me think about that song from Mean Girls, I'd rather be me. It's
Oh
like
yeah,
very
yeah,
um, and it's just yeah, I feel like I have these memories of like trying to be cool and like sometimes you succeed, but then there's that moment of like I kind of wish I had just like gone in myself and like let people find me that way than like been the cool girl standing in the corner because that is like not who I was.
right.
I love the word you use, surrender. Because
Mhm.
I think people sometimes think of authenticity, it's like, who's my authentic self? How am I going to find them? It's like, you don't have to go and invent authentic self. Like, you can just like kind of come home to it. It's a little woo woo, but like, it's there inside of you in that way. It's not a performance. I think if it feels like performing, it probably isn't authentic.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we all have the ability to tap into that, like that part of ourself, but for many different reasons, we're all on different life journeys,
Yes.
and perhaps that part of us is tucked away, and very appropriately so, because it may
Mm-hmm.
be out of safety, it may be out of, trying to kind of just protect
Yeah.
oneself. And so, I think we all have our little, if we liken it to kind of a glass sphere, we all have like that glass ornament sphere of authenticity like within us. It's just there are many layers or protective components that might prevent us from tapping into that. And, in many ways, like at some point, we get a little bit closer to that core and we start to notice, like, I'm feeling a bit more whole, or this really feels like me. And, that means maybe that some of those layers are starting to shed away. And like we start to actually feel it a little bit more capably.
I love that. I like already am planning to like top at this moment and like rewind later and go back to that. Like the portion you just said, the idea of the glass sphere inside of you just was like very visceral for me. That's so good. And on
Yeah.
that note, speaking of authenticity and safety and, finding those moments that feel appropriate to bring those layers back and be true to ourselves, we are recording in the month of June. It's Pride.
Mhm.
And we talked about queerness a little bit throughout. And I really did want to take a minute to talk about authenticity and queerness, specifically in Pride. I remember I watched a video top of this month that I loved so much on TikTok, reminding people it's because it's June, you have to be a
Mhm.
whole new person and like perform this whole like person you think you have to be. And I'm sure that you agree from everything we've talked about today. So I'm curious about what advice you might have for queer folks who are feeling a certain pressure to like show up a certain way because it's Pride or during times in the year. And how can we say true authentic selves when society pushes us into a box of what queerness looks like?
Right. That's so, it's such a, I'm happy you brought that up. I mean, that's such an important thing. I could really, oh gosh, I could go into a full hour and talking about that alone.
I like dropped the big one at the end.
I would say, first and foremost, we can celebrate Pride whether or not we're out, right? So there's a lot of pressure, I think, for a lot of people during the month of Pride, that you have to be confident, you have to like wear your identity on your sleeve, you have to be very forward and out and all these things, which, there is merit to a lot of that for a lot of people, and it's a beautiful thing. But I feel too that many of our soul siblings within the community might feel a lot of pressure in that way, or that they're not equipped enough to say celebrate Pride because maybe they haven't accepted their identity yet, or they're in a space that's unsafe to be themselves, or to really show that they have pride. So to answer that, like in the form of authenticity, I would say it all counts, right? Like you can be your authentic self, even if it's tucked away for a moment, because you don't have to kind of feel that sort of externalized pressure to either out yourself or to kind of put yourself in a position that could potentially be very emotionally or physically harmful. So there's a lot of weight kind of sitting on that. So that I really want to highlight that part, in the sense of sometimes we also think that authenticity means that you have to very outwardly kind of be authentic, but you can still be aligned with your authentic self and show it in a time that matters to you, right? That feels like it's okay to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Pride can be full of joy.
Yeah.
Pride can be outward, inward. Pride is a protest, as we
Mhm.
all remember. And there are just so many ways and nuances to the entire year, all
Yeah.
year round.
Yeah.
I also want to quickly highlight that I love in the LGBTQ plus section of your website, you have section on like activism and finding joy in there and like the therapy required to go on that journey. And I could just talk to you all day, but I want to wrap up and be respectful of your
Yeah.
time and just thank you so much for being here. This has been such a great conversation. They always go in places that I never expected, but this has just been so rich and amazing and so fun learning more about you.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
you. How are you hoping to cultivate more authenticity in 2024 and the rest of the year? And how have you already? I know that you're excited to bring your blog back a little bit. You're on Substack, and I feel that we're really aligned in what you're bringing. You mentioned that it's a corner of the internet, not just
Mhm.
a space for words on a screen. It's a place where vulnerability as a voice, struggles find solace, and laughter ends with tears. Where together we walk the labyrinth of ADHD, anxiety, trauma, and grief, sharing raw and unfiltered thoughts and experiences, which I love so much and is very wild, cozy free.
Thanks. Yeah, I would say like my main goal is to really value and honor my life path and my journey. I don't for a second doubt, where I am right now, kind of where I am in my career, where I am in my authenticity journey. I've learned that the more that I value and accept myself, that life kind of opens up in just a different way. I don't chase or seek out experiences that perhaps don't align
Mm,
with where I want to go. So my goal this year really is to pour back into myself in a way that feels kind of centered to my goal of really wanting to spread the mission of the mental hug. I want it to not just be a therapeutic space, but also a vibe, right? I want it to be um, something that like a resource of sorts that people can tap into even if they're not with me. So that's kind of where I want to go. And so I really want to pour back into myself. So my goal would be that I trust that, right? That I really kind of, again, we go back to the word surrender,
mhm.
surrender to like that journey and not like fight it. It's like kind of one of those like, just fall into it, just let it happen and just kind of trust that whatever comes out of it was what needed to come out of it. So, so
That's so beautiful. And I love that. And I think that you're already really doing that. So I'm grateful to be able to witness it, grateful for this mental hug that I feel I got today. And just can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. Like it's great to meet you in this way.
Oh my God,
So
of course. Yeah. There we go.